on the News Channel 5 network. This is Morning Line with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line on this Thursday. A good topic on hand, a topic I think a lot of people have strong opinions on, especially in the state of Tennessee. If Tennessee is recognized as anything, I think it is a very strong Second Amendment state, is it not? I mean, the importance of your right to own a weapon, I think is pretty much without question, especially here in the state. But then the debate continues as we see many of these shootings and the gun violence that occurs of how to prevent some of that, and whether or not that's gun control or other directions we can go as well has to be discussed, because people, frankly, keep dying. All right, so I'll invite you to join in the conversation with us this morning. And I want to say that we're not only coming to you this morning on the Plus, okay? You can also watch us, following us, streaming live on Facebook at newschannel5.com. So I'll be following it as well. And so if you are watching there and you want to comment, I can share some of your comments with our guests as they come up. And our guest this morning to talk about it with us from Safe Tennessee Project is Beth Roth. Good morning to you, Beth.
Good morning.
And Representative John Ray Clemmons. Good morning to you, sir. Good to see you both again. And both of you, I know, have strong opinions on what should be done with regard to gun control and all of that. We'll get into that. We also should say that John Harris, who's with the Tennessee Firearms Association, has kind of a different take on it, and he'll be coming on with us next week. So, we want to balance this out as always. But Beth, let's just start with you. In your mind, and of course, Safe Tennessee Project focuses on this, something needs to be done. Something more than we're doing right now, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Talk about that and where you think we should go.
Well, what we know is that Tennessee has a real problem with gun violence. We are currently 11th in the nation for firearm mortality. We are 7th in the nation for firearm homicide. And even more distressing are the numbers as they pertain to young people. We're 4th in the country for both firearm mortality and firearm homicide for young people aged 0 to 19. Yeah. So there's really no getting around the idea that this is a problem that we have in our state, and we need to acknowledge that it's a problem, and we need to acknowledge that it's a public health problem, and take steps to address it.
All right, yeah, and I think most people, gun lovers, those who don't like guns, would acknowledge there's a problem. We hate seeing people getting killed. So, Representative, the solutions, again, we go to this, and a lot of people, you're an elected official, and for a lot of elected officials in this state, depending on their constituency, even mentioning the word gun control is political suicide.
Right. Yeah. So it's a difficult political environment. I mean, but the reality is, let's start here. All of us are defenders of the Second Amendment. All of us, we take an oath as elected officials to uphold the Constitution. The question is, what are we going to do to protect people's lives? Okay. What are we going to do to ensure the public health? And the reality is, Second Amendment is there. We respect the Second Amendment. This isn't a challenge to the Second Amendment. We're looking at ways that we can make progress to ensure public safety. This is not only a public safety issue, it's a public health crisis. The statistics that Ms. Roth talks about are staggering, and Tennessee is leading the pack in the wrong way. We must do something. We must find ways to pass common sense gun reform in the state of Tennessee. And quite honestly, the ideas on the table, the ideas for which Ms. Roth advocates and other groups advocate, like Moms Demand Action, are supported by an overwhelming majority of Tennesseans. This isn't something like, we're not wanting to come in and take people's guns. We're talking about common sense background checks. We're talking about red flag laws, those types of things, ways that we can make a difference to ensure the public safety.
Okay, so we have some people on Facebook already commenting, some calls coming in, and Michelle's saying, no, it's not a crisis. She says, how dare people even try to regulate our rights? Now, there's a lot of ways. Look, by the way, Michelle, your rights, if you want to call them that, are regulated on a lot of fronts. I mean, there are laws restricting us from doing a lot of things.
Public speech,
yeah,
you
right,
name it.
all of that. But I get her gist. I mean, she's saying, Second Amendment, all right, we can own a gun. What do you mean? So when you talk about regulating, what thoughts do you have on this, what he was referring to? What needs to be done?
Well, like the representative brought up, I mean, things like expanded background checks, things that make it harder for people who should not have a gun. We should be doing everything we can to make it as hard as possible for people who should not have a gun to get their hands on a gun. And expanded background checks, as the representative mentioned, are supported by the majority, the vast majority of Tennesseans and Americans. And that doesn't infringe on anyone's rights. That's just an effort to make it harder for people who shouldn't have guns to get their hands on guns. That seems pretty common sense. Things like red flag laws or extreme risk protection orders that allow family and law enforcement who believe someone is an imminent risk to themselves or others to go before a judge and make a case and have a judge make a determination whether or not to temporarily remove guns from the hands of somebody who may be going through a temporary crisis. That's also legislation that's supported by the majority of Americans, and what we're seeing is the majority of Tennesseans support that as well.
What was your take? Of late, we've seen various large establishments, businesses like Walmart and others say that they've taken notice of this and they're going to stop selling certain items. So you think that's a good step in the right direction?
I think it's a good step in the right direction, and I think it's also an indicator that the business community, that corporate America is listening to Americans in a way maybe that our elected leaders are not. There's no way that these businesses would be taking these steps if they thought it was going to have a negative impact on their bottom line, and they are aware that the majority of people want to see these types of steps happen, and they're listening to people. It would be refreshing if our elected leaders would do the same thing.
Okay, and it's interesting, again, following some of the comments coming up on Facebook, is the idea of many of them say, and you hear this again time and again, okay, it's not guns that kill people, it's people that kill people. All right, and so I guess that goes to the heart of the point that no one's talking about taking guns away from folks who legally obtain them, okay? But it's finding ways to keep them out of the hands of folks that are going to do wrong. And we all know sometimes criminals are not going to go through legal channels to get the weapons, and so you don't certainly want to disarm law-abiding citizens. But how do you do that without maybe placing further restrictions on the law-abiding citizens who are seeking this? That's part of the rub. They're like, a lot of people worry it's a slippery slope.
Right. Well, let's start here. I'm a Democrat and I'm a gun owner. I've been around guns my entire life. I grew up on a farm and hunted my entire life. I've got one of my most prized possessions is a rifle that my grandfather handed down to me and my brother. And so let's don't stereotype all of us as wanting to take people's firearms. That's just simply not true. What we're looking to do is limit access to firearms in the general public that can be stolen out of cars, that can be used in crimes. And if you look at the statistics, the percentage of people who commit domestic violence and then go on to commit gun violence and harm their spouse, specifically women, is staggering. There's a direct correlation there. And so we're looking for ways, there is no pun intended, there is no silver bullet here to end gun violence. What we're looking at ways are common sense policies that can help reduce the likelihood of this. If someone commits domestic violence or a violent felony, they shouldn't be allowed to have a firearm. If we have, and there should be dispossession laws in those cases, and red flag laws should be passed. We should keep guns out of our parks, out of our public spaces, where a lot of people are congregating. Guns out of bars where alcohol is served. These are types of things that don't infringe on anyone's Second Amendment rights. These are things that will reduce the likelihood of someone committing a violent crime with a firearm and ensure public safety. The statistics and the correlation between the guns and trunks law passing and the amount of gun thefts that are then, and those firearms are then being used in violent crimes. And Beth can talk about these a little bit more. The numbers of that, and that correlation is eye-opening. And it is a direct result of bad policy equaling a threat to the public safety.
I do see the number that you already circled there. We have to go to a break, but I reported that last week as Metro Police send it out. But I mean, some 542 guns stolen from unsecured vehicles, meaning not locked, since the beginning of the year. And that's crazy. And those are mostly guns probably owned by responsible gun owners. If you're a responsible gun owner and you leave a gun unsecured, just laying there on the dashboard in your unlocked car overnight, you're not responsible. That's an end of story there. But that's a different situation there. We'll discuss that. Also, again, want to remind everyone, this morning we're talking about this with these guests, okay? We have John Harris coming on from the Tennessee Firearms Association next week. He has a different take on it. We tend to sometimes do this so we don't have a totally heated debate that breaks out here. We hear from both sides, but we balance it out. But certainly, there's a lot of callers and a lot of folks right now that I think have different opinions on this on Facebook as well. So we'll get to all of those comments and the calls with our guests right after this. Stay with us.